this is section number 6. It's particularly important because it has to do with eldership. It has to do, as a matter of fact, with discipleship, which is the most important thing. What normally happens is that people, when they find out about the existence of the masters and the hierarchy, and if they are explained correctly what they represent and why it is feasible to assume that they do exist, once they are reasonably convinced that this is a reality, it's perfectly normal that they would want to be perhaps a direct disciple of one of them. Usually the question is asked, is it possible to get in touch with them? Is it possible for me to become a disciple, a direct disciple of one of the masters? The wisdom is of such magnitude, and what they've given us is so wonderful, that I think that for my own personal experience and my own personal growth, it would be great if I could get in touch with one of them and I could receive direct instruction from them. But this doesn't happen. We must remember that essentially they are incarnated under specific conditions. It's true that they have to come from a woman. They have to be born like anyone else. This is true. But the condition of their incarnation is a different one from a regular human being, an average human being. Because their karma, their physical karma, has been exhausted. Therefore, they don't need to pay anything along those lines. But they are constricted by a number of rules and parameters, norms, which they accept and they very, very carefully keep. They never violate them. And one of them is they're not able, they're not authorized to interact directly with normal, average human beings. For them to get in touch with a human being, which is, could be an initiate of some kind, otherwise forget it. It will not happen. Simply, it's not that they don't want to, it's that these are the rules under which they have incarnated. This is the promise they have made, to abide by those rules, and they respect them. They never break them, as we shall see. So, we're going to have to simply rest in peace, so to speak, with the information they give us. Essentially, if we think well and carefully, we realize that this desire to be in touch with them personally is something so selfish. It's not something important. The important thing is whatever they give us, is the information they give us. And if we can live our life based on that information. The life of someone who has aspirations of a spiritual nature cannot be the life of anybody, of someone which is just an average citizen from any country. It just doesn't work that way. The demands on someone who has spiritual aspirations and who's conscious of his advancement and the need to advance, there are requirements which go beyond what is considered normal. Things which are considered culturally acceptable in the country where we may belong to are completely out of the question when it comes to training under one of the masters. Once you have become a disciple of them, the exigencies of life in the manner in which we live our life are very intense and to be respected thoroughly and carefully. They don't waste their time taking a disciple that they know is not prepared for that yet. The great majority of us are not yet prepared for that. So they have to find someone who really has promise along those lines. It's not difficult for them to observe a person clairvoyantly and through the look of his subtle bodies determine the degree of advancement of the person and whether he really constitutes in his ways, in his inner capacity, someone which is fit to be a disciple. This is something that they are able to determine. If they see something there that is just not promising in that sense, you'll never get in touch with them. There's no way. But if they see something that they feel harbors some kind of a promise of improvement and that they can really instruct that person properly in their own ways, give them the necessary training for further advancement, well, they will do it. They will. But this is the minority of people in our days, in our times. The great majority of people in our humanity at this present moment of our development, the great majority is not even close to that idea. There are some people which are prepared, this is true, but they're not the majority. They are a minority, essentially. That's what the problem is. So, among other things, the fundamental thing in order to be able to aspire to such a thing, to become a disciple of them, is that we have our own life. We have to make a living. If we are business people, we have to conduct business in a very, very straight and very honest manner. Which is a very difficult thing to do these days, because the competition will be cheating. It's something that happens all the time. So those who do not cheat are at a disadvantage. In that case, you better abandon the idea of enterprise work and become someone's employee. But then that's another problem, because we have to belong to a company, or we have to work with people which keep straight a line of decency, and honesty. If we are working for a company which is doing dishonest things, then of course we are being a part of that, even if we don't like it personally, even if we would not do it personally, but we're working for that company. So therefore, that's out of the question as well. It's not something that we can do, and it's not something that we should do. So there are some difficulties attached to this idea of discipleship with one of the members of the hierarchy. The other thing is also that once we are accepted as such, a number of responsibilities come about. Because we cannot make certain mistakes that we normally make when we're not in that situation. Once we have received a certain amount of knowledge and a certain degree of training, we have acquired a great deal of responsibility to use that in the best possible fashion for the improvement of our fellow human beings. We have to ask ourselves, why is it that we want to advance? Why is it that we want to be a disciple of the Masters? Why is it that we are aspiring to this spiritual type of life? We have to ask ourselves this very honestly. There are many people who think of their own advancement, and that's the only reason they have to request information from the Masters or discipleship from them. The moment that happens, we will never get it. It's important to understand that our motivation to become involved in this type of knowledge, in this type of wisdom, has to be thinking of others, preparing ourselves to serve in the most effective possible manner to our fellow human beings. Because we have that responsibility. We have been given the knowledge, we have been given the wisdom. We have been given doctrines that really improve the life of every human being when they understand them and when they live by them. If we really want to advance, we have to forget about our own advancement. I know this sounds paradoxical, because it's perfectly normal and understandable that all of us will want to advance in any way in life. Spiritually also, that's no exception. The difference with anything else, any other type of aspirations that we may have, is that in this particular case of spiritual advancement, we have to forget about ourselves. In the sense that whatever we learn, whatever we assimilate, or whatever they teach us, must be in order to perfect ourselves to be able to give a better service to our human beings, human endeavor. Of the whole human endeavor, we need to somehow prepare ourselves in the best possible fashion so as to give the best possible service. This is an important thing to do, but we have to think of others. If we're doing it because we want to advance, we will not advance at all. This is one thing they're told to tell us and make it very clear, usually. Now, another thing that's important also has to do with the question of love. That is a question that pursues practically us all through our life, all through our emotional life. Because for us, normal human beings, love is a feeling. Gradually we need to abandon this idea of love as a feeling, because in that particular case, love includes a number of things which are not, perhaps not the best. There's jealousies involved, there's demands involved, I love you, if you love me back. If you don't love me exactly the way I love you or more, then I cannot love you. I love you because you are my son. I love you because you are my mother. I love you because you are my country. I love this because it's my culture. All these are personal, emotional loves. And they're not love, really. The moment you say because, the moment you add the word because after the word love, it's not love. It's another form of selfishness. But then, of course, it must be understood that we start learning how to love through the family and through the culture where we belong, through the country and so on. The love for these, for whatever surrounds us, is perfectly okay, but it cannot remain there. Not if we have spiritual aspirations under circumstances. Eventually, we learn to love impersonally. That is to say, we need to somehow be able to help, be able to give that love, be able to sacrifice for individuals who have nothing to do with us personally. We are concerned about the welfare of our children, not only the children from our family, the children from our race, the children from our country, the children from our culture. But we're also ready to be concerned about the needs of children from other countries, other culture, or other races. Somehow we completely forget about that. We're forgetting in this particular case a fundamental element, which is we are all one. It doesn't matter where people are from, or what race they have, or what physical aspect they have. These things are completely immaterial. The most important thing to remember is that we are all brothers and sisters, whether we like it or not. This is a fact of life. We all belong to the same, this is a tree where all the branches belong to the same trunk. And we are all the branches, and the trunk is only one. We all come from there. I know there are many people who dislike this idea that we are one with everyone, especially when it comes to think of certain races, certain cultures, and so on that we consider to be inferior to ours. That is a perception, and usually very wrong. It's important to visit some countries, it's important to travel, it's important to get in touch with people from other cultures, because the moment we do that, we realize how similar we are. There are differences, of course, of a cultural nature, but the similarities are way more, and the most important ones, of course. So based on that idea, our desire to serve should have no frontiers under any circumstances. Our love, which is personified, so to speak, by the service that we give. Because loving is giving, expecting nothing in exchange. That is what the universe is all about. That's what we're told. Alan Blavatsky says in the Secret Doctrine, that the universe is an act of love. Why? Because the Logos gives us everything. The infrastructure, which is enormous, all his power, all his life. Expecting nothing from us, we cannot give it anything. Absolutely nothing. We are given everything. We are given the universe, we are given the suns for energy, we are given the planets for life, we are given the vehicles, a mind to think with, emotions to be motivated by, a physical body to function by. All these things we are being given by nature, given by God, if we may use that word. Expecting nothing in exchange. So that is why it's correct to say that the universe is an act of love. Because the one who manifests it and keeps it with energy can expect nothing from us. So, imitating that, which is a fundamental law of nature, is the most important thing if we really want to speak about love. The moment we start thinking about love in a personal sense, it's not love. There's an element of selfishness in it which is inevitable. I'm not saying that people should start being distant from each other and to not feel personally with one another. No. That would be the opposite. That would be inadequate, inappropriate. We have to give our affection, our love to those who surround us. They expect to be treated kindly. To treat each other with kindness, with affection, is perfectly okay, no problem there. But let's not limit that there, because the moment we do that, we are no longer candidates for discipleship of one of the masters. It's going to take us a few lives to get to that point, to become one of their disciples. But we have to start at some point, evidently, and we have to have things clear in that sense, especially in that which concerns what we call love. And be made very clear in our minds that unless the love is completely unselfish, unless the love means service, giving without expecting anything in exchange, it is not really love. Not in the sense that we expect it to be if we have spiritual aspirations and if we want to increase our process of evolution, of individual evolution. There's something else. Then another thing that's important also in the question of the discipleship, fundamentally, is the manner in which they teach. We have in our world, in most what we call civilized countries, educational systems that apply certain methods, certain ways to educate pupils. We have grammar school, fundamentally, then we have secondary school, high school as they call it, and then we have, of course, academic education in universities. There are methods and systems which have been developed to illustrate students, to educate them, fundamentally. But when it comes to an education concerning this type of thing, which includes ethics, the masters, even with their closest disciples, never, ever force anything on them. They just merely tell them, this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to avoid. There's wisdom in following their instructions. They're full of wisdom, and they will get you where you want to go. There's no problem there. The most important thing. And then, of course, do our best to avoid doing things that they are telling us not to do, things that we have to leave aside. I have to tell you, some of these things that we are asked to abandon completely are perfectly okay in a great part of the most civilized countries in the world. They are not penalized by law, they are not considered immoral or inappropriate or whatever. But when you come into the realm of the masters, the ethics are completely different. They are much higher, they are much more demanding. Things which are perfectly okay in our normal culture of any civilized country are not that are okay with them. The great majority of countries in the world, for instance, to just give an example, the great majority of countries in the world consider normal to kill animals to eat them. This is not acceptable as a disciple of the masters. They would never do that. You cannot do that. You cannot kill in order to survive. That's the law of the jungle. Even if it's considered to be appropriate or non-punishable from the cultures where we belong at present, at the point of the masters is totally inappropriate. We have to be vegetarian. We have to be sure to comply with the principle called in Hinduism ahimsa, which means harmlessness. You don't harm anyone in order to benefit yourself. You don't. This is something that is an inflexible rule. If what we want is to be above the ordinary. We have to understand that once we get involved in this something, we're ready to give up a number of things which are considered normal for others, we are getting out of the ordinary, moving into the extraordinary. If we want to do that, obviously, we're going to have to stop behaving in an ordinary way. Even if we're told by the culture we belong that whatever we're doing is perfectly fine. It's not illegal. It's not immoral. In other words, what we're talking about here is a different code of ethics, which may be very difficult for some to follow and maintain. One thing they do, and they're of the opinion that we shouldn't push things. If someone, for instance, realizes that eating meat is inappropriate, and then he starts somehow stopping himself from eating beef or whatever it is, but he's dying of the need, of the appetite for meat, continually. And he develops a bad temper and pleasant attitude because he's forcing himself into something he's not ready for that yet. They don't want to force anything. They don't want us to force anything. Things must flow naturally. A moment comes when you just don't want to eat meat anymore. There's something about the taste, about the smell, about whatever it is, no matter how well prepared it may be, that pulls us back and we just don't want to do it. That is the moment to abandon meat. And anyway, if we have been eating meat for 40 years of our life, and then we come to the conclusion that eating meat after all is not appropriate, and then we decide to go vegetarian, we might get seriously ill. This is not something we should do. The cells in our body are used to that kind of stimulation brought forth by meat. It also brings about diseases. This is true. But the fact is the body is used to that. So if we're going to abandon meat, the first thing to do is to do it very, very slowly. It may take 7 years for some people to abandon completely their appetite for meat. But at any rate, the fundamental point is that we shouldn't force anything. Nature operates slowly. This is one thing they have always remarked. There's a law of graduality in the universe. Everything is gradual. Nature is not concerned with speed. It has no clocks to strike anywhere. It takes its time to achieve whatever it achieves, but once it's achieved, it's forever. It doesn't disintegrate. It has a very slow rhythm. Following that is wisdom. If we want to achieve something that will not abandon us eventually, that will keep with us, slowly, gradually. Observe the body, observe the needs of the body, gradually educate the body to get to the point in which what we're going to be doing is in line with whatever the masters hope from their disciples, but not pushing things in a sort of imprudent manner. It's not the best way to do. Something also that's very important. Has been said that because we have become, after some training, we just are one with everyone else. Some people complain about that because they say, I'm going to lose my individuality. No such. There's no such a thing as losing our individuality. That is never lost. What happens is that we really feel others as being part of us, but our individuality is never lost. This is something that we have as monads. That's where the name comes from. Monos, the Greek monos means one and indivisible. The name was invented by a German occultist by the name of Leibniz. But fundamentally, we continue to be individuals. But we're not indifferent to whatever happens to others, because we feel for them as if they are a part of us. This is what is intended to say when we should always feel one with everyone else. Not that we're going to lose our individuality. Another thing is also, well, the question of principles and training that we have. Is particularly harsh in some particular case. What we're told is something quite remarkable. The master, once he has accepted you as a disciple, he will make, in etheric manner, a sort of clone of the disciple and keep it in his office, in his place where he is. And that clone will somehow reflect what is happening to the disciple in his interaction with life. And it will give them, the master, an idea of the progress or the lack of progress of the disciple. It's a method they have that sounds pretty strange to us and pretty difficult to even conceive. However, this is the way they manage to keep in touch with the, as I said, progress or lack of progress of the disciple. This is an important thing to do. Now, there's something remarkable about the way the Master K.H., which had the main part of this correspondence with Mr. Sinet, defines the adept. He says, the adept is a rare efflorescence of a generation of inquirers. And to become one, she must obey the inward impulse of his soul, irrespective of the prudential considerations of worldly science or sagacity. He's not saying that the adept is a wonderful individual, is a perfected human being, is full of love and the powers that he has, and he doesn't say anything of that. He says, that essentially we're investigators. This is the whole thing. It's a rare efflorescence, a rare thing to happen, but it does happen. Now, speaking about how the whole thing started, he says, ages ago, people began to make certain rules, according to which they intended to live. All these rules have now become law. Law is law with us. and no power can make us abate one jot or tittle of our duty. Duty, let me tell you, is for us stronger than friendship or even love. As without this abiding principle, which is the indestructible cement that has held together for so many millenniums the scattered custodians of nature's grand secrets, our brotherhood, nay, our doctrine itself, would have crumbled long ago into unrecognizable atoms. Now, considering the whole texture of the teachings found in the letters, the impression is gained that these rules and laws are not something arbitrarily imposed by those highest in authority, but rather that they are somehow organically meshed into what is. They are in harmony with the structure and operations of nature's laws. The Master adds, you must know and remember one thing. We but follow and servilely copy nature in her works. This is a statement of humility, in the sense of telling us that the Masters don't create anything. They just follow laws. That is, they have learned about the laws of nature and the method to use them to our advantage. This is all they claim to do. And they say every Western theosophist should learn and remember, especially those who would be our followers, that in our brotherhood, all personalities sink into one idea, abstract right and absolute practical justice for all. Then he adds, along the adage, that is, in the embodied spirits, are forbidden by our wise and intransgressible laws to completely subject to themselves another and a weaker will. When they train, they just don't impose anything. That's what I said before. That's the important thing to remember. They don't try to hypnotize the student or the disciple into becoming better. They just give him the information so that he can become better. But that's it. It's up to the disciple to follow those instructions or not to. It's up to him or her. But that's it. They're not going to force, and they're not going to come over and say, hey, listen, I told you not to do this, and you're doing it, you're not going to advance. No. They'll never do that. We do that. Our educational systems do that. But they don't. They just told you once, and they're not going to repeat the whole thing, because when they tell you something, it's exceedingly clear. And there's no way to misunderstand. It's up to you to follow. If you don't follow, that means you're not in line with whatever he's teaching you, and he will move on. Now, considering that they are individuals, it's not surprising to find that they occasionally differ among themselves. This is another thing. Although they are one line in terms of the general idea of the improvement of humanity and the service they need to give, they have different opinions sometimes as about the ways and means of achieving things. And the Master says, we are not, as you know, always of the same thinking. But the Mahatma Moria, somehow adds, we never quarrel. Quarrels and even discussions we leave to those who, unable to take in a situation at a glance, they thereby force before making up their final decision to anything to analyze and weigh one by one and over again every detail. And then the Master adds further, I will never interfere in his, referring to the Mahatma Moria, ways of training, however distasteful they may be to me personally. So they do have different methods of training which they are permitted to have. They do whatever they think is more effective. That's it. And they may not like what the other master is doing in terms of his training of his own disciples. That's none of his business. Those are the disciples of the other master. So he will not interfere. And there's wisdom in that. But whatever method or procedures, they also say nothing, my friend, even apparently absurd and reprehensible actions is ever done by us without a purpose. Some of the things they tell us and some of the things they are going to demand from us may appear unreasonable. They're not. They may appear because we are used to certain things, we are used to certain ways. They are not their ways. So mostly, usually, is something that they find to be more effective. And eventually, as it happens, as time goes by, we realize that whatever was done that we thought was not that great, in fact, was the right thing to do. He says, "No, my friend, that though in our world we may differ in methods, we can never be opposed in principles of action." This is an important thing. Now, their broad and general purpose is clearly stated, and it would appear that specific actions inevitably stem from something that they say, which is the purpose we have all at heart, namely the dissemination of truth through esoteric doctrines conveyed by whatever religious channel, and the effacement of crass materialism and blind prejudice and skepticism. That is the main purpose that they do have. Now, concerning the ultimate goals and things that they cannot permit themselves to be deflected from by any personal considerations, they say the first requisite in even a simple fakir is that he should have trained himself to remain as indifferent to moral pain as to physical suffering. Nothing can give us personal pain or pleasure. Now, this is quite remarkable, because we human beings are always moving between pain and pleasure. It's part of our life, and we consider that to be very important in our life. But to them, which are perfected human beings, nothing gives them either pain or pleasure from a personal standpoint. They have overcome that completely. They're sort of flown above that. We never whine over the inevitable, but try to make the best of the worst. And though we neither push nor draw into the mysterious domain of occult nature those who are unwilling, never shrink from expressing our opinions freely and fearlessly, yet we are ever ready to assist those who come to us. Realize, my friend, that the social affections have little, if any, control over any true adept in the performance of his duty. In our sight, an honest boot black is as good as an honest king, and an immoral sweeper far higher and more excusable than an immoral emperor. We have no right to indulge in personal attachments and feelings. We have no favorites, break no rules. Let him rid himself of the maya that any man living can set up claims upon others. He may create irresistible attractions and compel their attention, but they will be spiritual, not mental or intellectual. Nothing draws us to any outsider save his evolving spirituality. And how is that shown, evolving spirituality? By the manner in which the individual lives his life, and his dedication to others, and forgetting about himself. This is what the Master is talking about when he says his evolving spirituality. That is what attracts them, and that will bring them forth. That is how they will notice us, with an idea that we may eventually serve, help their cause by serving in the best way we can. Strong will creates, and sympathy attracts even adepts, whose laws are antagonistic to their mixing with the uninitiated. And this is the reason why they cannot get in touch directly with persons which are not initiated. I can come nearer to you, but you must draw me by a purified heart and a gradually developing will. Like the needle, the adept follows his attractions. Now, in spite of the rather towering perspective of which many of these statements seem to be made, there are passages which show the warm humanness of the Mahatma, as well as the compassion, which must be the deepest motivation for the tremendous sacrifice they have made in renouncing their own liberation to remain with suffering mankind. Mr. Hume, for instance, whose great stumbling block was his enormous pride, considered that he had reached a very superior stage of development. To him the Master K.H. said, "You pride yourself upon not being a patriot. I do not. For in learning to love one's country, one but learns to love humanity and more." And there are some human responses also to add. Until final emancipation, says the master, reabsorbs the ego, it must be conscious of the purest sympathies called out by the aesthetic effect of high art, its tenderest chords responding to the call of the holier and nobler human attachments. I confess that I individually am not yet exempt from some of the celestial attachments. I am still attracted to some men more than others, and philanthropy, as preached by our great patron, the teacher of nirvana and the law, the Buddha, has never killed in me either individual preferences or friendship, love for my next of kin, or the ardent feeling of patriotism for the country in which I was last materially individualized. And there's another aspect also that shows the humanness of the masters. When the Master K.H. explains, says, no adept can be supposed to keep his will in constant tension and the inner man in full function when there is no immediate necessity for it. When the inner man rests, the adept becomes an ordinary man, limited to his physical senses and the functions of his physical brain. The inner adept is ever ready, ever on the alert, and that suffices for our purposes. At moment of rest, then, his faculties are at rest also. And he explains this, that this may account for some of the errors that happen in the letters in punctuation and that sort of thing. They did happen, some small errors, but they did happen. You know. And he explains why. He says, an adept, the highest or the lowest, is one only during the exercises of his occult powers. So in other words, they live in their personality, inevitably, because they are in a physical body, and the physical body has a mental body and an emotional body just like any other human being. But they can switch their existence, so to speak, or their consciousness in such a way that they will come out of the personality and now manifest their individuality. The higher self is in them ready to function when it corresponds. Apparently what happens is that to keep the higher self continually overriding the lower self is something that may eventually damage the lower self. So they just don't do it. They function normally like any other human being, and when they require to function in their higher self, they do it. They have from us this great difference. They can switch from the lower to the higher, or from the higher to the lower, according to the needs that they may have. And this is something quite remarkable. We are not gods, and even they are chiefs. They hope. And what he's saying is, this is a very important thing to consider, and I may comment briefly about it. As it happens, many people have told me, if they have these powers, this control of a natural law, and so on, how come they did nothing to prevent the two terrible world wars we had in the 20th century, and all the other armed conflicts we had, which were really horrible in terms of their cruelty, their waste, and so on, what went on. How come they didn't do anything to stop that nonsense, and that sort of thing, that horror? And that's one thing. They are not permitted to intervene. We human beings have to make the mistakes. We learn from mistakes, not from someone coming over and preventing us from making mistakes. They know we're going to screw up. They know that we're going to make terrible mistakes. And we're going to have to pay for them, because the law of karma will be there. And they don't like to see us suffering, because they consider us to be their younger brothers. When you have a younger brother, a small little child, when you're an adult, or you're a young man, you feel love and you want to protect, and you try to protect your little brother the most you can. In this particular case, they like to protect us, and they would like to avoid us suffering. But they know that by doing so, we're never going to learn anything. So therefore, they allow our mistakes to take place, because we will learn from the mistakes. We don't learn from good advice. We don't learn from common sense. We learn from mistakes. We make them, and we make them repeatedly. And finally, the pain is of such magnitude that we realize that we need to change. And of course, whatever we're doing is not the most appropriate thing. They're not going to interfere with that process. There is wisdom in that. And all the rules they have, all the laws they have that govern them, are full of wisdom. They know that this is the way, that this is the manner in which humanity unfolds and develops, by having to make the mistakes and paying for them. That brings about reflection, reflection brings about correct procedure, and correct procedure brings about advancement. That's a chain of events that cannot be interrupted, and they are very carefully not to interrupt it. But so, they would hope that whatever they give us is going to be used in terms of information, will be used for the better. But they just hope. They don't really know. And this is one of the reasons why whatever they give us is little. They give us information and they hope that it will be useful for the better. It's important. The Mr. Hume, the other correspondents, did not understand. His pride was of such magnitude that he couldn't tolerate the idea that if he asked a question, the master would tell him, "I'm sorry, my friend, I cannot answer this question. I'm not allowed to." This bothered him no end, and ended up with a correspondence with him, because he got very angry and started writing in some letters. That was not appropriate. So the correspondence with him was concluded. He lost, therefore, a fantastic opportunity. His pride got in the way. It should be a lesson for all of us. Some of us have this intense pride. Better put it aside if we have any kind of idea of inner development. This is one of the great obstacles to unfoldment, to spiritual unfoldment, is pride. There's nothing to be so proud of. Leave it aside and have the necessary humility to recognize their errors and not try to repeat them. This is the thing. This is what helps us advance. To keep on the pride of saying, this is the way, I want it this way, and forget it, I'm not going to tolerate anything else, you have to answer my questions. That's a sure way of losing contact with them and stopping our advancement. Unfortunately, Mr. Hume didn't understand it. He had a great idea of his own intelligence. But observing the situation, it is clear that he wasn't that intelligent, not as much as he thought he was. Another thing that's very important also is the question of humor. One tends to think that these people, because of their wisdom and their advancement, are very serious and grave people. That's the wrong idea. They have a great sense of humor. They laugh very much, and they're very happy to tell jokes and so on. There's nothing about them that is so serious. They don't take themselves so seriously the way we do. So they think that the question of humor is fundamental. This is really something that the Master Moria, in fact, says there is no advancement in the path unless there's a sense of humor involved. We cannot take ourselves so seriously. This business of taking ourselves seriously is another demonstration of self-concern. In other words, of selfishness, which is something that is, not necessary, really, and it will be in the way to our advancement. Then finally, the Master says something quite remarkable in terms of stimulating. It's a very stimulating statement that he makes concerning, an advancement. He says, "Believe me," to Mr. Sinet, "believe me, there comes a time in the life of an adept when the hardships he has passed through are 1,000-fold rewarded. In order to acquire further knowledge, he has no more to go through a minute or slow process of investigation and comparison of various objects, but is accorded an instantaneous, implicit insight into every first truth. The adept sees and feels and lives in the very source of all fundamental truth." To get to that, we have to go through a tremendous degree of hardship. Max Heinrich, who wrote a remarkable book called the Rosicrucian Cosmoconception, says something in that book that always stayed with me, and should stay with all of us, I think. A life of pressure and happiness is the worst thing we can possibly have. It's the direct obstacle to our advancement. It's very important to keep in mind that the harder our life and the more difficulties we find, the more challenges we encounter in our daily life, in our incarnations, the more of our advancement. We may be betrayed, we may be misunderstood, we may be slandered, There may be many things that will hurt us, that will hurt our nature, our feelings. Learning how to deal with that is not easy, but it's something we need to learn. A moment comes when none of those things will bother us. If that happens, we are on our way. This is the way of the disciple. This ends lesson number 6. Thank you.